All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. We're thrilled that you joined us on a very transformative week here on the Missouri state political scene. First of all, we started the week with Senator Claire McCaskill announcing that she would not run for governor, but would run for re-election. Then we saw a new House of Representatives in the state committee structure unveiled, so there'll be a completely new way bills move through the Missouri House. And speaking of transformation, we're now joined by the Chief of Staff to the Mayor of St. Louis, Francis Slay, Jeff Rainford, who will now be leaving the office here shortly.
Scott, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. First of all, I think a lot of folks have wondered, what is the thing, of all the stuff you've been involved in, what are you most proud of?
You know, I tell people that I'm actually proud of the big things we've done. The city's attracted $9 billion with a B in new investments since Mayor Slay came into office. And you know, buildings that were vacant for a very long time, like the old city hospital, like the Peabody Opera House, like the arcade building, and many, many others, have new life and have brought new energy and new activity to the city. And you know, people who haven't been in the city in a long time come back and say, "Oh my gosh, it's so much different and so much better." But I'm also proud of the things that haven't gotten a lot of attention, like when the Mayor Slay took office, lead paint poisoning in children was at an epidemic proportion, and lead paint poisoning, you know, hurts IQ, leads to more violence, and he reduced it from almost 1 in 5 kids down to virtually nothing. So very proud of the big things, but also the things that didn't get a lot of attention.
When is the last day?
So I'm going to work through February the 6th, and you know, it's still crazy right now, still a lot going on right now, so it still seems a little bit unreal to me. And you know, after 14 years, actually I've thought a lot about you know, how I'll feel the last day I walk out of City Hall as Chief of Staff, and I'm pretty sure that I'll shed a tear, because while it has been a maddening job and a frustrating job, it's also been thrilling and really fulfilling, and I have to say thank you to Mayor Slay and the people of St. Louis for giving me the chance.
What's the one thing you would like to have another shot at?
Well, I don't know if we could get another shot at it, but the biggest disappointment is I really thought around 2006, 2007, the city was at a tipping point, was really ready to take off. You know, the momentum was there, and then the Great Recession hit, and it really pounded us. It really hurt the city. We were able to play defense, and we were able to hold it together, but, you know, things really still haven't gotten back to where they were, and they certainly, we certainly don't have the momentum that we had then. You know, so that's my biggest frustration or biggest regret is I really thought we were there, and then that happened, and you know, since then, like I said, there's been a lot of defense.
Tell us about the conversation with the mayor. You're the only Chief of Staff he's ever had, correct?
Yeah, Mayor Slay and I go back to 1995. Yeah. I ran his first campaign for citywide office for President of the Board of Aldermen. I ran his campaign in 2001, and then again in 2009. I've been with him every step of the way. I'll still advise Mayor Slay. I think his attitude was sort of like mine. How the heck did you last this long? I mean, nobody's ever done this job for 14 years. It is a burnout job, both emotionally and physically, and I think his thinking was, you know what, I'm glad that I had you as long as I had you.
Is it hard to let go, though? Do you think there'll be when there's a problem that comes up in the city, will it be hard for you not to be the one in the middle?
That'll be the biggest thing, both a frustration and a habit, because there are lots of things as chief of staff that when they go right or go wrong, you can pick up the phone and fix right away. And now I'll be, I'll have to call somebody who'll call somebody, and it will. My first instinct is always going to be, hey, something goes wrong at the airport, to call Rhonda up and say, hey, Rhonda, you got to do this, and then Rhonda's going to remind me, hey, you're not my boss anymore. So it will take some getting used to.
Tell us about the new chief of staff.
So the new chief of staff is Mary Ellen Ponder, who, as it turns out, is the first female to be the chief of staff of a mayor in the city of St. Louis in its long 250-year history. She's really, really bright, really smart. She'll have a completely different style than I do. I think my style is a little bit more straightforward and a little bit in your face.
Throat punch was used this week
by
Mr. Kelley.
that I've ever thrown a throat punch, but I can't say that metaphorically it's wrong. Her style, she's very, very smart. She'll have a different style. I think she'll be able to build coalitions probably better. She'll be able to talk people into things better. And I think at the end of the day, she's going to be very, very effective.
Can you tell us a little bit about the team she's assembling around her?
Yeah, the new, and I think it's going to be strong, the new operations director, that'll be the person in charge of potholes and snow removal and parks and streets and things, is going to be Todd Walterman, who has been battle tested as the mayor's streets director, and he's going to do a terrific job. He is a great leader and a really smart guy and an innovator. I think that's going to be, him along with the city councilor, Winston Calvert. Winston is a young lawyer, came from the private sector, is a really sharp guy. And then Patrick Brown, who is going to be the new deputy chief of staff, is very strong too. So I think the three of them are going to be able to do this without skipping a beat. And then beyond that, what the mayor and I have talked about is that I'm going to continue to work with him and work with them on bigger issues like the stadium, like Ferguson, like crime and things like that. But on the day-to-day stuff, the tactical stuff and things like that, the city will be in good hands.
Speaking of the future now, what do you do on February 7th?
So it's sort of funny. I'm going to start Rainford and Associates. It'll be a political, strategic communications, public policy firm. It's really what I did, before I took the chief of staff job. In 2001, I left Angelita's Rainford and Associates to run the mayor's campaign. Then the mayor said, hey, just get me started. So I thought I'd go in for 2 years, and then it lasted 14 years. So I'm really getting back to what I did before, just with a 14-year hiatus.
Just a 14-year break, sure.
Exactly. Hopefully people will remember who I am.
I don't think they've forgotten. Let's talk about some of the issues in the city, though. We were scheduled to have the incoming chief of staff with us now, but she's at a press conference because of some crime issues. Tell our readers and our viewers in Jeff City that are state policymakers, what are some things the state could do to help deal with issues so these aren't as prevalent in St. Louis?
So crime right now is our #1 issue. It's not always our #1 issue, but there's no doubt it is right now. And things have gone haywire since the shooting in Ferguson. And there's probably a couple reasons for that. Our officers have been taken off their regular jobs and their beats and things to go on to manage all of the protests that are going on. And in some manner, the criminals seem to be more emboldened. I mean, for 7 straight years, crime went down. It was down overall by more than 50%. But since August, things, like I said, have gone haywire. And so I think there's a couple of things. #1 is we got to get our officers back to fighting crime, get back to what they like to do, which is policing the city and enforcing the law and get arrests back up and get crime back down. #2 is the mayor's proposed 160 new police officers. And this is not anything that Jeff City can do. It's something that we have to do here. But ultimately, I do think when you get to Jeff City, you really got to be talking about what can we do as a state to improve policing. Now, we've had ideas like a COPS program where, you have state money in it and local matching money. But whatever Jefferson City does on the policing side, I think the first thing is do no harm. Sure. Let's not do anything that are going to tie police officers' hands or make their jobs any more difficult unnecessarily than they do. Beyond that, we need to address racial disparities. A lot of the crime comes out of our neighborhoods that we have concentrated poverty, and we have kids going to bad schools. We need more charter schools, and the mayor wants charter school authority so he can charter schools. We have real...
and that's worked other places, right?
It's working it's worked in other places, worked in Indianapolis. And we have a charter school process. It's unwieldy, but we have a charter school process where we go out and find a sponsor. We started more than 15 charter schools, and all of them to various degrees, are successful. So the mayor has a track record. The problem we have is that it is so unwieldy that it really makes it difficult and takes up more time than it needs to for us to start new charter schools.
There's one thing the mayor articulated that I heard one time. In Jefferson City, there's the issue of guns. And in Jefferson City, you only hear one side of that debate, which is more. The mayor's made some arguments that were pretty nuanced, and he's listened to in Jeff City by the party in power. Can you articulate for our viewers some of the things you've seen the mayor do, or maybe your thoughts on the issue of guns and how they are different maybe in St. Louis than they are Sedalia?
The problem and we get that, listen, I camp a lot in the Ozarks. I float the great rivers in the Mark Twain National Forest. I understand, when I'm driving around south central Missouri and southern Missouri, I see the difference between how people live their lives there and how they live them in the city of St. Louis, where out in the rural areas, your nearest neighbor, is a long way away, whereas in the city of St. Louis, we are densely packed in. The problem for the city is we have no problem with law-abiding citizens having guns and using them however they see fit. Our problem in the city is that criminals, it's way too easy for criminals and people who are even mentally ill to get guns. And then number two is there's not enough of a consequence when criminals use guns. The mayor's talking today about a study done by the University of Missouri St. Louis in which there was, what they found is that 63% of the criminals who used a gun, who were convicted or pled guilty, 63% got probation and didn't do any time. I mean, I get that for marijuana possession and things like that, but if you're using a gun, there ought to be a consequence. And so the mayor's for a gun court, and he's for higher bonds for people who are using a gun in the commission of a felony. The other issue with state laws is, again, we're fine with hunters and all that, but there's a law now that says that even if you're a convicted criminal, even if you're not supposed to have a gun, if you have a gun in your car, you don't have to have a permit for it. You can have it out in the open, and if police arrest you for that, there's nothing they can do about it. We have, of the arrests made in the city of St. Louis for illegal possession of guns, 40% of them get thrown out based on that technicality that they're like, oh, that's not my gun in the car. And because the law is so loose, the circuit attorney in 40% of the time has to dismiss the charges or not charge in the first place, and therefore people who are potentially violent or who already have a history of violence get to go free.
Another issue the mayor's been to Jeff City before on is tax credits. Is that something that you'll see him in the Capitol again advocating for? And maybe explain to some of our viewers in other parts of the state how important those tax credits are to St. Louis.
The historic tax credit is the most important tax credit in the state of Missouri for the city of St. Louis. We are #1 in the country. The city of St. Louis is #1 in the country for historic rehabs. That means buildings that were vacant or derelict or abandoned that are historic have been rehabilitated, and primarily because of the state historic tax credit. I think we're over $1 billion now in construction of historic buildings that is related to the historic tax credit. It's #1 in the country. Without it, I don't know where our city would be. Of all the things, there's lots of things the mayor has done, lots of things that have happened, but all the tools, that's the single most important tool.
Quickly, on the issue of equality, is there something that on your mind that the state could do to assist in addressing some of the issues of equality that have been raised here by protesters and other government leaders?
So I think that the challenge for the state of Missouri is that people in sort of the wealthier suburbs and the rural areas have a very different view of what happened in Ferguson and what happened in our neighborhood, in Shaw neighborhood, and in North St. Louis. They have a very different view of it. And I think at the end of the day, what we have to do is Republicans and Democrats and conservatives and liberals got to figure out what can we agree on. Because coming out of this session with nothing is not going to help. So I think there's probably going to be agreement about these kangaroo courts that exist in St. Louis County and some of these municipalities and police departments that aren't big enough to have the kind of sophistication to handle the kind of difficult issues you have in an urban setting. Beyond that, I don't know that you're going to be able to get very far on that side of it, but I hope we can all agree that every child, including every low-income African-American kid in North City and North County, should have access to a good education, should be able to, even if they didn't get a good education, if they want to work and get a job and things like that. So I would hope that we could at least agree on racial disparities.
And last question. 3 years from now, will the Rams play in St. Louis?
So I think that what's going to happen in St. Louis is that we're going to remain an NFL city, but I can't really tell you which franchise. I don't know. I'm not being coy.
An NFL team, it just might not be the Rams.
It could be the Rams with the current owner.
Would you be a part of that process?
Well, I'll be part of the process of keeping St. Louis an NFL city, absolutely.
I think that bodes well for the prospects. Mr. Rainford, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. And we'll be right back with our This Week in Missouri Politics Opinion Maker panel.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads, because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
And welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. It's now time for our Opinion Maker panel. This week we're joined by Ann Schweitzer, Public Eye STL, Incorporated, of course. We have a history maker here this week with Scott Dieckhaus, the Executive Director of HRCC, elected 118 members?
Yes.
And speaking of electoral wins, Megan Shackelford with the Kelley Group coming off her big win in the county exec race. And Danny Pfeifer, the founder, owner of Catalyst, an up-and-coming lobbying firm, and does a little bit of everything, right, here in Missouri. Yep. And Dave, we'll start with you.
Sure.
The biggest news this week had to be Claire McCaskill ending weeks of speculation and saying that she would, in fact, not run for governor and run for the United States Senate. What does that do to the political scene?
I think it's going to have a profound impact on 2016, particularly on the Democrat side. I think, there's no doubt it was a great day for the Attorney General, and it was a great day for the Democrat Party when she made that announcement. I think that it really is going to free General Koster up to run the kind of campaign that he wants to run. He's going to have 20-some months now to travel the state and talk with people about issues that he cares about and to be the kind of candidate he wants, which really, I think, is a conservative Democrat. He's not going to have the challenges of a primary where he has to go talk about more left issues, seeking Democrat votes. He's not going to have to seek, hopefully, the endorsement of the Sierra Club or or other more left-leaning groups. He's going to be freed from that and be able to talk about issues that I think are more representative of him and his career. If you look, I mean, some people don't know or forget, but he was a Republican prosecutor. He was a Republican senator. And was elected Republican caucus chair just days after being elected to the Senate, and has taken some pretty conservative stances on things as Attorney General, where the Republicans, in contrast, are not going to probably have that luxury if they have to fight out a tough primary on those
Shackelford,
issues.
how will that go down for the left, though? I mean, those are all things that make good sense to win a general election. Is he out of the woods yet on a primary?
I would hope so. I think, historically, we've seen that Democrats aren't always the best at clearing our fields for primaries. We don't always help ourselves as much as we probably should. And I think we saw that really play out with the senator and Bob Holden back before Governor Blunt took office. And that did not work out well for us. So I'm just pleased to see that we can kind of all come to the table, see where everyone's strengths lie. We need the senator in the Senate where she is. As a Democrat, I don't want to lose that. She's a good moderate. She represents Missouri very well, and we need to continue that.
And she would have appointed a Democrat. Is there some on the left that are a little bit disappointed that some of those issues that Danny talked about won't be discussed now for 20 months?
I'm personally pretty disappointed. I worked on her campaign for governor in 2004 as a volunteer, so I've been a McCaskill fan for a long time. So I'm definitely disappointed that she won't be running, but I agree completely with Megan that we really do need her in the Senate.
2018, do you think she falls through and runs?
I hope so. I think she'll run. I think she would have had more reason to run for governor if she wasn't planning on running for the Senate. So,
Scott Dieckhaus, you're the campaign guru. You have the reigning title here in Missouri. What does this do to the race? What does this do to House races? What does this do to races that aren't governor?
I don't think it has much impact on House races directly. I think I think Claire McCaskill, Senator McCaskill, is a very smart woman. I think she looked at the landscape. I think she realized that she probably was going to create more problems by running for governor for the party, for the Democrats in Missouri, than help by running for governor. I think she probably realized that Obama is extraordinarily unpopular in Missouri, that she's been tied to Obama, and really there's no way to loosen those ties. It was going to make things difficult. You hear rumors that she had polls in the field or whatever, and I don't know that that's true. I think that she probably could have figured that out without a poll, that it was a tough path forward. I think, excuse me, I think the state of Missouri has swung far enough to the right and has become more red since 2008 that, Senator McCaskill's ties to Obama would have been extraordinarily difficult.
Because that state has swung more red, it looks like. Is Jason Kander a happier man today? Is he a relieved person?
I think probably so. I think it allows him to have his field and his options much more open than they otherwise would be. But I think that it's really not entirely correct to say that we have become this red state. I think that a lot of it has to do with the way our districts are drawn, where our populations reside, and how they're lumped together, because we clearly still have a stronghold, the Democratic Party does, in statewide offices.
Would you be able to say you still have a stronghold if the Senator's decision was different?
I would say that we still have a stronghold. I still think there are more voters who are likely to go with a moderate Democrat than they are a more extreme conservative Republican when it comes to population. Whenever it comes to these state, more local races, clearly the way the districts are drawn have us in a bad position. But I do think that the race between the Senator and the Attorney General would have been problematic, especially because they're very similar in their style. They're both moderate. They both come from a prosecutorial background, and I just think it wouldn't have been
Only
a
one voted for
worthwhile
Obamacare, though.
Primary.
Would you be able to get around?
Yeah.
Danny Pfeiffer, the 118 seats, it would seem like there is more than a small move to the right, but it doesn't always transition to these statewide races, like Megan was saying.
No.
With this in mind, do you think this makes it more likely for some of the other statewide Democrats to want to jump into races? Does a John Wright make a comeback because this ticket will be led by Chris Koster?
I think that they have to consider that. I really do. I think that it makes it more attractive. The Democrat ticket surely isn't settled yet, and there's still some seats that I think there's speculation of different people who may or may not run. There may be primary for one or more, there may not, but it definitely makes it more attractive.
It's always been my opinion, and I'd be very interested in your thoughts. People make this assumption that there's a clear front runner, but I think there's some statistics that show the state is getting more red because of whatever reason, the people that show up and vote are voting more Republican. Do you think that it's a slam dunk because it's Koster? I mean, I think the Republicans have a very good, two qualified candidates. This is going to be a very competitive race. Our poll last week showed it only being a 4- and 6-point race with Koster, and that's with him having a much higher name ID.
I don't think it's a slam dunk necessarily. I think it depends how red he can make the opponent look. Because with McCaskill and Aiken, when she was able to pull out every red thing he's ever said or done, that definitely helped her win in the end. So if he's able to kind of follow that lead, he has a good chance with that.
And Megan, changing topics, we just heard Jeff Rainford, the longest-serving chief of staff in city history, leave. What is your impression of what that does to the St. Louis City political scene?
You know, I think that it's going to really give us like a fresh new breath, but at the same time, Jeff has been there for 14 years. He is an idol to any Politico who's working in the city of St. Louis. And Mary Ellen Ponder, who will replace him, has learned from the best. And so I think we're really going to see an interesting thing where she's gotten to see the history of how he's been able to accomplish so many things that he highlighted earlier. But I'm good friends with Mary Ellen, and she comes from a different background than Jeff, which I think is going to be incredibly helpful for the city. She comes from an advocacy background, from more of an organizing field background. So she really understands community, she understands people, she understands diversity and different groups of people in a way that I think will really freshen the city. And really, we probably need that now more than ever.
Danny, whatever happens at City Hall, Republicans in Jeff City are extremely receptive to Francis Slay. Do you wonder if Jeff Rainford leaving will affect that, or?
You know, I think it will. I mean, let me say, as someone who's worked and learned from Jeff Rainford over the years, there's no bigger political pro in the state, and I'd echo your comments. If there was a portrait of what a political professional was hanging somewhere, it would be Jeff Rainford. And so he certainly will leave a hole, but Ms. Ponder is more than qualified to take it, and the mayor's still the mayor at the end of the day. And I think that the Republican legislature will respond to him the same as they have.
And tell us a little bit about Mary Ellen Ponder. What do you think her running the ship will look like?
I agree with Megan. She does come from an organizing background, and that's reflected every day in her work. She brings people together from all over the City Hall building. She's worked really well with Walterman. I think he'll be a great director of operations. Patrick Brown and Mary Ellen have worked really closely together as well. Patrick replaced Mary Ellen coordinating with the alderman when Mary Ellen became operations director.
So. It was interesting to note in the Post-Dispatch story on the move, some of the folks that aren't normally that charitable to the mayor spoke highly of her. And I think she got some thank you or some congratulatory cards sent to her. Do you think there'll be a slight change in the message coming from City Hall to the Board of Aldermen?
Possibly. I think she just works really well with other people. And I think people respect that.
And I think Jeff had a great point when he said their style is certainly different.
Yeah.
I think you know, Jeff has a way of really staying focused on what he knows needs to happen and more of a tunnel vision way of getting that accomplished, which has obviously been very successful. But I think you will see that Mary Ellen is more of the coalition building type. She can certainly be tough. She was my first boss in St. Louis City when I moved here, but she is also very encouraging and able to see things from people's point of view in a way that makes her very relatable and likable, and you want to work with her. And I think that that's just something unique, and it's a great time to have that for the city. Speaking of change, Scott Dieckhaus, you helped elect the majority of the people in the House now, and I think in part because of the job HRCC's done, you've had to break out to a new committee structure. Can you explain to our viewers this new committee structure and how this facilitates such a large majority? Sure. I think, you know, we've had successes as a Republican majority. I think that's part of the reason that we continue to grow the majority as well. But there have been miscues and missteps along the way. There have been pieces of legislation that have kind of snuck through the process, or, you know, people thought something meant something that it didn't, and legislation got passed, and, you know, we had to go back the next session and correct those things. So I think changing the structure and allowing for more oversight, more accountability within the House alone, I think it's going to take a lot of those missteps and miscues out of the process. And basically what we've got is kind of super committees overseeing committees, subcommittees beneath those, and each one of those super committees kind of oversees 3 or 4 different subcommittees that are tied to the same topic. So it feeds up. I think it takes some of the power from the Speaker's office, and I think that Speaker Deal deserves a lot of credit for coming in and saying, you know, I'll concede some power. You know, the Speaker used to have a pretty good thumb on things with the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee is much less powerful than it was before. I just think overall it's good for policy. I think it's good for Jefferson City. I think it's good for the members. I think it's ultimately good for the state, and I think Speaker Deal deserves a lot of credit for that. Coming from your background as a former elected representative, that's an interesting take. And do you see any, are you more hopeful this new committee structure will bring any legislation that you like?
I don't know if I'm hopeful that it'll bring in more legislation I like. What I wonder is how it'll work for lobbyists. When you have a whole special committee, I see Danny laughing over there. But how will that work? You know, you have a committee that a bill would normally go through, and then it would move on. But now, that's not exactly how it's going to happen. There's going to be a whole special committee and all these other people that have their hands in these bills that you wouldn't have expected them to have hands in before. So that's my main question for how that will work now. Megan, are you any more hopeful that legislation you like? You've been a little critical of Jefferson City in the past. I'm never hopeful it's elected that this legislature is going to get anything done. I mean, I think hopefully, yeah, you know. Danny, what will happen here?
Look, there's got to be a process, and this, I think, is a good move. I agree with Scott. This is a good move by Speaker Deal, decentralizing power. It creates more work for lobbyists and firms like me. You have to talk to more people, not one rules committee, 13 sort of committees who will be the deciders on this stuff.
And I think we'll have to end it with you doing more work in the legislature. All right, thank you for joining us this week on This Week in Missouri Politics.